Hey mathletes, today we're going to look at adding integers visually, and I'm going to share with you two different methods. We'll use three examples for this. And the first example is going to be a positive added to a negative. The second example is going to be a negative added to a negative. And the third example is going to be a negative added to a positive. I didn't include a positive added to a positive because I figured you already knew how to add two positives together. Okay, so the first method that I'm going to share with you is using tile spacers, and this is the same method that I used in the previous video on rock, paper, scissors. If you haven't looked at that video, I highly suggest that you do because it's not only a great method for adding integers, but it's also a fun way by playing the game rock, paper, scissors. So let's start with this first one. So the first one is positive 3 plus negative 4. So I'm going to start with 3 positives, and I'm going to show that with using the plus tile spacers. So here's 1, 2, 3 positives. And now I'm going to include 4 negatives, and I'm going to show those with dashes. So 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives. Now remember that when you have a positive and a negative, putting them together makes my favorite number, which is 0. So let's circle all of what I call the 0 pairs. So there is one 0 pair, there's another 0 pair, and I see one more 0 pairs. Remember that these three equal 0. All that's left over is one negative, so the solution to this is negative 1. Okay, let's look at the next one. The next one is negative 2 plus negative 3. So I'm going to start with 2 negatives. Here's my 2 negative tile spacers. And now I'm going to include 3 negatives. So I'm going to put 3 more negatives in. I notice there aren't any positives, which means I cannot make any 0 pairs. So I'm just going to see what the sum would be. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 negatives. So the sum of negative 2 and negative 3 is negative 5. Now the last example, we're going to start with 4 negatives. There they are. And this time I'm going to add 1 positive tile spacer. Here's my 1. I can now circle the negative and the positive to make a 0 pair, and all that's remaining then are 3 negatives. So the sum of negative 4 and 1 is negative 3. So that's the first method I wanted to share with you, which is using tile spaces. The second one is by using number lines. So let's go to the first one again. 3 plus negative 4 equals negative 1. So here's my number line. Just a reminder that number lines do not have a beginning or an end because numbers are infinite. So when I decide which numbers to use, what I look at is my first number, which is the 3, and I want to make sure that I include a 3. And then in this case, when I was making my number line, I was thinking I needed to go back 4, so I needed to have at least 4 more numbers that were behind the 3. Okay, let's take a peek at this. I'm going to start out with positive 3. Okay, so there's my 3. And now I'm going to go back 4. When you see a negative, it means to go back. So I'm going to go back 1, go back 2, 3, and 4. And I end up at negative 1. So the sum of 3 and negative 4 is negative 1. Let's look at another number line. This time I'm going to start with negative 2. Okay, so here's my negative 2, and I'm also going to go back, because it's a negative, I'm going to go back this time 3. 1, 2, and 3. And this time I end up at negative 5. So the sum of negative 2 and negative 3 is negative 5. The last one, I'm going to start at a negative 4, but this time I don't have a negative, I have a positive. So I'm going to go ahead 1. And I end up at negative 3. So as you can see, you can either use the tile spacers or you could use the number line to visually show how to add integers. I hope this helps, and I think it's a fun way to add integers. I hope you do too.